Your business is doing well. As you look at your numbers and see how much you've been paying out for rent for your business space, you say to yourself, I could own something for this amount of money. Congratulations. You are in a great spot, and many business owners have had the same thoughts that you are having. Today, I want to share with you a few things to keep in mind before you take the plunge and purchase that building for your business. I'm Sharon McLennon, real estate broker and CPA. So let's go ahead and take a dive in and see what you need to keep in mind. Do confirm zoning and use first. Don't assume that the current use guarantees your use. Make sure that there's no special conditions or the existing business may have been grandfathered in, and once they leave, that use is no longer permitted. Verify parking and signage. Make sure that whatever parking requirements you have on signage, those are available on the property. Don't assume that adjacent property is necessarily a part of your property, even if it's currently being used for parking or storage. Always confirm the boundaries of the property so you know exactly what it is that you're getting. Make sure that you analyze your total occupancy costs as well. Don't just budget based on principal and interest in your mortgage. Remember that you're going to be required to pay taxes. Insurance can be significant on commercial buildings, as well as have a provision for repairs and for CAM charges. Also, do inspect beyond the surface. Make sure that you're aware of the lifespan of the roof. If you're going to be needing a new roof in a couple of years, that's something to take into consideration. Also, look at your AC, HVAC capacity to make sure that the capacity is adequate to sufficiently cool or heat in the wintertime the space that you're acquiring. Another thing to take into consideration is the electrical load. Make sure that the property has sufficient amperage for your use. Say, for example, you are acquiring the property to be able to run specific medical equipment that might need more amperage than the typical office or retail type space. Make sure if you have a special use need for the property that you check to make sure that the infrastructure is adequate to support the usage that you're planning on. Also give some thought to ADA compliance, and most commercial properties do require a phase 1 environmental inspection, so factor that into your plans as you're going through the acquisition process. A smart strategy when dealing with commercial property is to make sure that you plan your exit before you buy, before you get in. Who's going to buy it? Once you're done with the use that you anticipate, who is a likely buyer for that property? Can it be leased if you're not looking to sell? What is the overall trajectory? Is the area improving? Is it declining? What will others like about the layout? Are there any special factors that are attractive to you that would be attractive to others once you're done using the building for your use and moving on to either sell or rent it as a disposition strategy? Always keep that in mind. We spend a lot of time and energy focusing on getting into the property, but it's equally important to make sure that we spend the same amount of time thinking about how we will exit, because at the end of the day, the last thing that you want is to be stuck with a commercial property that you no longer need or that your business no longer needs and that you have a difficult time offloading. Another thing to keep in mind is don't overbuy or over leverage. Unless your strategy is for you to use one portion of the building and rent out the remaining space while you're there, be cautious on taking on too much space. Make sure that you are not buying more than your revenue can currently support. That is going to put a drain on your liquidity and create problems down the road. So make sure that if you are buying a larger building, you have a clear strategy as to what portion will be used for you and your business, and what the plan is to make sure that the remaining portion of the building doesn't become a non-performing asset where it's not generating any revenue, it's just sitting there and is a financial drag on you and your business's resources. Because again, at the end of the day, that is not the goal. You want to be able to optimize the commercial space that you own, and having non-performing commercial property doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, this one is a big one. Don't buy in your operating company's name. All right, and I'm not an attorney, so this is not to be construed as legal advice. However, buying a building in your company's name creates a huge risk for you, for your business. If there's a lawsuit to the business, the commercial property is now exposed. If there is a lawsuit to the property, the business is exposed when everything is commingled. It creates a whole lot more risk, and it doesn't protect from anything. A best practice when buying commercial property for your business is creating an entity that will own the property and having your business lease space from that entity. That way we get a good separation of finances. We get a separation of risk. There's a firewall between the business and the property, and it just overall makes better sense. It may seem like an easy thing or a small thing to mention. However, if you get this wrong on the front end, trying to undo it, it's expensive and it's very hard to do. So if I can give you one piece of advice of what not to do when acquiring commercial property, do not buy it in your operating company's name. Set up a separate entity and have ownership be resident in that new entity. When setting up the new entity, make sure that you are careful. You get advice, legal and tax advice, on what the best structure should be for that purchase. Some structures are just not good for holding real estate, particularly S corps come to mind. They create a lot of pitfalls when it comes to holding property in an S corp is not optimal. So make sure that you get legal advice when you're looking to make that purchase, so you can set up a structure that will make sense for you and for your business. It'll allow you to take advantage of any tax provisions or any tax breaks that may be available, and give you flexibility in terms of ownership, and it will insulate you from risk. So just make sure that you're clear on what's a better structure. It's always easier to set it up properly on the front end than trying to fix it on the back end. It's harder and it tends to be more expensive. Don't ignore financing and refinance risk. Commercial loans are fundamentally different from residential loans. The standard residential mortgage is going to be a 30-year mortgage where the mortgage is completely paid off at the end of the loan term. Commercial mortgages have different terms. You may have a balloon payment. We're using one term for amortization and another term for payout. It's not unusual, for example, to have a loan that is using a 20-year amortization, but it has a 10-year balloon payment. What that means is that you're making the payments, and the payment is calculated as if the loan were going to be in place for 20 years, but at the end of 10 years, that loan has to be paid off, either through cash proceeds brought to the table, or you have to refinance it to be able to get it paid. A lot of people in our market got really jammed up on commercial property because they had terms that were resetting during the last 2 to 3 years when interest rates virtually doubled from what they were previously. And so a lot of folks were in loan products, commercial loan products, that had a much lower interest rate than what was available when the balloon payment came due. And to refinance, they could not be approved, or it created significant financial hardship. So make sure that you're very clear on what the timeline is for your financing. Don't just assume that because you're paying on a specific term amortization that means that your loan is going to be good for that amount of time, because balloon payments are standard or are very commonplace in commercial lending. So make sure that you understand what that is and that you're keeping an eye on that date, so that you're not 2 months or 3 months out from having to pay off the loan, and now you're trying to figure out, oh well, where do I get the funds to be able to meet that obligation? That's not where you're trying to be. So keep an eye on that time frame, because that is very important. So here are my summary of quick tips to keep in mind if you are pursuing commercial ownership for your business. 1, make sure that you buy in the correct entity. Okay, so make sure that you've gotten the advice that you need to buy in the appropriate entity. 2, make sure that you separate risk completely. Never take title in the name of your operating business. 3, model the 5-year tax impact. Look to see what the consequences are going to be over the next 5 years, and make sure that you take that into consideration before you sign. Make sure that you maintain adequate reserves. And 5, last but not least, think like an investor. If you want to find out whether or not buying commercial property is a good move for you and your business, please feel free to reach out to me for a complimentary, no obligation consultation. The best way to schedule that is through my website at simplyaskSharon.com. Please remember to like the video as well as to subscribe to the channel so that you can be notified when future videos get released. I hope that you found the content helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, whenever you own property, you own possibility. See you next time.